Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Say the word pirate, and a very particular picture usually comes to mind. A swashbuckling hero, a parrot on his shoulder, a treasure map tucked in his coat, a cutlass in hand. We picture endless adventure, total freedom, a chest of gold buried on some forgotten island. But the actual life of a pirate during the so-called Golden Age of the early 1700s was almost never that glamorous. Most men turned to piracy out of desperation, fleeing conditions on merchant ships and naval vessels that bordered on slavery. It was a life dominated by crushing boredom, illness, and grinding labor, punctuated by sudden bursts of danger. Tonight, we set the legends aside and look at what this life truly involved. We'll climb aboard a crowded wooden ship, uncover the surprisingly democratic system pirates lived under, learn what they actually ate, what they feared, and why so many ordinary men gambled on a short, dangerous life beneath the black flag rather than a long, miserable one under a king's command. Before we begin, if you're enjoying these deep dives, a like and a subscribe genuinely helps the channel grow, and it means a lot to me personally. I'm also always curious where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. Drop that in the comments. I love reading them. Now, let the modern world fall away. Let's travel back to an age of tarred rope, gunpowder, an open ocean, an ordinary sailor's world. Our story doesn't start with a pirate. It starts with an ordinary man. Picture yourself as that man, not a hero, not a villain, just a sailor in your early 20s. And your entire universe is this cramped, waterlogged wooden ship groaning its way across the vast Atlantic. It's 2 hours before sunrise, and you're already worn out. You were roused an hour earlier, not gently, but by the sharp shout of the boatswain, the officer who runs the deck crew. Your palms are split and blistered from days of hauling on rough, salt-hardened rope, heeling over only to tear open again. The air is cold and thick with sea spray that never fully dries, chilling you straight through. Every muscle from your shoulders to your lower back throbs from yesterday's labor, and the day before that, and every day going back 6 months to when you left Bristol. This is life aboard a merchant ship in 1716, not adventure, but ceaseless, punishing toil. You and a few dozen other men are a speck of humanity adrift on an endless sea. And the work never lets up. You climb the swaying rigging 100 feet above the churning water to set or take in sail. You man the pumps to clear the rank, stagnant water pooling in the hull. You scrub decks, patch canvas, coat rope in tar, day after day, in scorching sun and driving rain. And for all this, your pay is meager, and not even guaranteed. Merchant sailors weren't paid until a voyage was fully complete. If the ship went down, you got nothing. If disease or accident killed you along the way, your family got nothing. And if you made it home, your captain, who holds near total authority, could still cheat you, inventing fines for a dropped tool or a moment's hesitation and docking your wages for it. You've watched men labor for a full year and come home with only a few shillings, just enough for one night's drinking before signing on to the next voyage to repeat it all. The food is even worse than the pay. Your daily bread is hardtack, flour, water, and salts baked into something closer to wood than food, riddled with weevils and requiring a long soak just to be chewed. The meat is beef or pork so heavily salted for preservation that it must be scraped and soaked 4 hours before it's edible. Worst of all is the water, stored in wooden casks until it turns green and slimy. A diet with no fresh produce inevitably brings scurvy. You've watched shipmates' gums bleed, their teeth loosen, old wounds reopen, their thinking grow foggy, all from simple malnutrition. Hanging over everything is discipline. A merchant captain is absolute monarch of his small floating kingdom, and his instrument of enforcement is the cat o' nine tails, a multi-tailed whip that can shred a man's back for the smallest offense, talking back, moving too slowly aloft, or simply falling out of favor. There's no trial, no appeal, just the crack of the lash. And you know you're fortunate in one respect. You chose this. Many in the Royal Navy did not. They were pressed into service, snatched off the streets of a port town, or seized from another ship at sea. Naval discipline is harsher still, the labour no lighter, and there's the added horror of dying in battle, torn apart by cannon fire and flying splinters. So that is your world. Relentless labour, rotten food, stolen wages, and punishments handed out on a whim. Your future promises nothing but an endless string of these grim voyages until sickness or the sea finally takes you. To you, piracy isn't some romantic fantasy. It's a rumour, a hushed story passed between sailors. A dangerous road, certainly, but a different one. One overcast morning, scanning the horizon, you spot it, a strange sail closing in fast, flying no flag you recognize. The men nearby start murmuring, faces draining of color. They know what this might mean. But underneath your own fear, something else stirs, a small, dangerous flicker of curiosity. The ship grows closer, cutting through the swells with a speed your own vessel can't match. It's a sloop, smaller and quicker than your lumbering merchantman, and its deck is crowded with far more men than any trading voyage would need. Your captain is barking orders, panic edging his voice. Then comes the proof, a burst of white smoke from the sloop's side, followed by the deep crack of a cannon, and a ball skipping across the water, just ahead of your bow. A warning shot, the universal signal to stop, or the next one won't miss. Your captain isn't foolish. His ship is slower, his crew smaller, his handful of guns no match for a dedicated raider. Fighting would be suicide. His cargo is insured, his life is not. He orders the flag struck. Grim resignation replaces the panic on deck. The pirate sloop draws alongside. Grappling hooks bite into the rail, and the two vessels lock together. Then they're aboard, not a chaotic mob, but a disciplined, confident crew. They look like you, weathered by the same sun, calloused by the same ropes. But they carry themselves differently, with a freedom you've never seen on a merchant deck. Pistols in their belts, cutlasses at their sides, they disarm your officers and herd your crew onto the main deck. You brace for the worst. Instead, a man steps forward, not the captain, but the quartermaster, the pirate's second in command, the one who speaks for the crew, settles disputes, and oversees the plunder, often wielding more day-to-day authority than the captain himself. Calmly, he explains, they mean no harm to ordinary sailors. They want cargo, and they want volunteers. He lays it out plainly. Stay aboard and return to the life you know, or walk away from it entirely. Join them, and you become a free man with an equal share in every prize they take. You look at your shipmates, most, weighed down by families and fear of the noose, stay put. But a few, men like you, with little to lose, share that same spark you feel. The choice is genuinely yours. The pirates want willing brothers, not captives. You weigh a guaranteed future of hard labor and spoiled food against the promise of plunder and freedom. A short life, perhaps, but your own. You step forward, along with two others, and cross the rail. A pirate presses a tin cup of grog, watered rum, sometimes sweetened with lime or sugar, into your hand. It tastes like freedom, your old ship, lighter by a few crewmen, and a hold of cargo, sails on without you. You're now aboard a ship whose enemies call it lawless, and yet somehow it doesn't fall apart. The answer comes soon enough. The quartermaster gathers you and the other new hands and unrolls a worn sheet of parchment, the ship's articles, what's come to be called the Pirate Code. This isn't handed down from on high. Before every voyage, the whole crew debates and votes on each clause. Every man, from captain to newest recruit, gets an equal voice. You've joined not just a crew, but a floating, self-governing republic. The quartermaster reads through the key points. Every man has an equal vote in decisions, whether to attack, where to sail, how to punish. There are no wages, only shares, no prey, no pay. The captain typically draws to shares, the quartermaster around 1.5, skilled hands like the surgeon or carpenter a bit extra, and an ordinary sailor like you a full, undiminished share. Personal disputes are settled ashore with pistol or blade to keep the peace on a crowded ship. No women are permitted aboard, to avoid jealousy. Every man keeps his weapons clean and ready. Lights and open flame are forbidden after 8 at night, not a curfew, but a fire safety rule on a wooden ship packed with gunpowder. Most remarkable of all is the compensation system, a rough form of insurance. Lose your right arm in battle, and the ship's treasury might owe you 600 pieces of 8 before any plunder is divided among the crew. A leg, perhaps 500, an eye, 100. It's a promise that your brothers will look after you, a kind of care utterly unheard of on the ship you left. With the reading finished, the quartermaster sets the parchment on a barrel head. You take up the quill and sign, entering a binding pact to follow these rules, fight for your brothers, and accept the consequences of breaking your word. You are now a full member, entitled to vote and to a share of every prize. With the formalities behind you, you look at your new home properly for the first time, the very sloop that ran your old ship down. It's lean and quick, a former trading vessel reworked into a predator, more cannon than any merchantman would carry, decks cleared for fighting, coiled rope, stacked shot, spare spars lashed along the rail. You close your eyes and just listen. The deep creak of timber, the slap of waves on the hull, the snap of canvas overhead, a gull's cry. Salt air mingles with the sharp tang of tar. Below decks is where the ship's heart really beats. Climbing down, you're met with thick, close air. This is the 'tween deck, no cabins, no walls, just row upon row of hammocks slung so tight you could touch your neighbor. Hammocks, borrowed from indigenous peoples of the Americas, sway with the ship's motion instead of pitching you onto the deck in rough seas. The air carries the smell of unwashed men, stale rum, damp wool, and beneath it all, something fouler still, rising from the bilge, the ship's lowest point, where sea water, spilled food, and waste collect into a stinking soup that never fully clears. There's no privacy here. You'll eat, sleep, and work within arm's reach of 80 or more men, which is exactly why the articles are so strict about violence aboard ship. Morning comes, and you learn a pirate's day is no idle wait for treasure. The ship runs on the watch system, 4 hours on duty, 4 off, around the clock, with no such thing as a day off. On watch, you trim sails and read the wind, but most of the work is upkeep, caulking, hammering tarred fibre into the deck seams to keep the ship watertight, tarring rigging against sun and salt, scrubbing away algae, checking that the guns and powder are secure and dry. Sometimes you climb to the crow's nest, scanning an empty horizon for a single sail. Off watch, you eat, sleep, mend your gear, anything but true leisure. The labour mirrors what you did before, but everything about it feels different. No one screams at you. No officer threatens the lash for a slip. The crew works with quiet purpose, because the ship is theirs. A well-kept vessel sails faster and catches more prizes, and you hold a direct stake in that outcome. You work from investment, not fear, and the atmosphere is lighter for it. As the weeks blur together, you come to understand how this outlaw society actually governs itself, through a careful balance of 2 leaders, designed specifically to prevent the tyranny you fled. The captain is your expert navigator and war leader, respected day to day. But during a chase or a fight, his word becomes absolute law, obeyed instantly, because there's no time to debate in the heat of battle. The instant the fighting ends, though, that power evaporates. He can't flog a man on a whim, can't redirect the ship without the crew's consent, and can be voted out at any time if he proves cowardly or unlucky. Real day-to-day authority rests with the quartermaster, the crew's advocate. He rations food and water fairly, judges disputes, orders any punishment the crew has voted for her as personal revenge, leads boarding parties, and safeguards the plunder until it's divided exactly as the articles demand. It's a genuine separation of powers, one man to lead in war, another to guard the crew's interests in peace, checks and balances born from men who'd already suffered under absolute rule. Food and drink, daily rations aboard a pirate ship, start out disappointingly familiar. The same weevil-ridden hardtack, the same tough, over-salted meat, supplemented with dried peas, beans, or oats, food built to last, not to please. Water still turns foul in its casks, which is why the daily grog ration matters so much, a small daily comfort in an otherwise grinding routine. But unlike a merchant ship bound to a fixed schedule, a pirate vessel answers to no timetable, which opens up real advantages. Running low on stores, the crew might put ashore on some empty island to hunt wild pig or goat, roasting the catch over an open fire on the beach, a rare luxury of fresh, unsalted meat. At sea, men fish from the stern for tuna and prize catches of all sea turtles, easy to take while basking on the surface, capable of feeding the whole crew, and able to be kept alive on deck for weeks at a stretch. The real feasts come after a successful capture, when the crew raids not just the strongbox, but the captain's pantry, fine wine or brandy, white flour, sugar, rare spices, even live chickens or a pig. For one night, the ship becomes a floating banquet, fresh bread instead of biscuit, stolen wine in tin cups, songs late into the night. For a few hours, you eat better than royalty, a reward that, for a while, pushes back the constant threat of scurvy, illness and injury. Serious injury or sickness is a heavy topic aboard any ship, but pirates approach it with a mix of grim necessity and real solidarity. Trained surgeons are rare and enormously valuable. A captured one might be all but forced to join, offered a full share and decent treatment in exchange for his skill. Lacking a surgeon, the role usually falls to whoever's best suited, often the carpenter, since amputation was the most common major procedure, and he already knew how to make a clean cut with his tools. Sometimes the cook, skilled with a blade. The medical chest, often itself plundered, held saws, knives, probes, forceps, laudanum for pain, mercury for venereal disease, and various herbal remedies. After a fight, the deck could become a rough operating theatre, wounds stitched shut, bleeding stopped by searing the flesh with hot iron or tar, and shattered limbs amputated to head off fatal gangrene, the patient dosed with rum or laudanum, biting down on leather while held still by shipmates. Survival odds were poor, but better than certain death from infection. Fevers and dysentery spread easily in such cramped, unsanitary quarters, and scurvy remained a threat despite better rations than most sailors enjoyed. But the code's compensation system meant that losing a limb wasn't just tragedy. It came with a guaranteed payout, a tangible reminder that your brothers wouldn't abandon you. Navigation. None of this matters if the ship can't find its way across a trackless ocean. So navigation ranks among the most critical skills aboard. That duty usually falls to the captain, sometimes aided by a dedicated sailing master, working with hand-drawn charts, often stolen from captured vessels, frequently inaccurate, but the best guide available. A magnetic compass gives direction, a chip log, a weighted piece of wood on a knotted line, gives speed by counting how many knots pass through the hand in a set time. Latitude, north-south position, could be measured fairly reliably using a quadrant or astrolabe to gauge the sun's angle at noon or the North Star's height at night. Longitude, east-west position, had no reliable solution at all during this era, forcing navigators to rely on dead reckoning, starting from a known point, tracking speed and heading over time, and estimating position, a method vulnerable to unseen currents, storms, and small compounding errors. A skilled navigator also read the natural world, watercolor, bird behavior, cloud patterns, 4 clues no instrument could provide. The hunt. The cry sail-ho from Le Crow's Nest sets the ship alight. The captain's spyglass confirms it, a heavily laden merchantman low in the water. The chase begins, and the first tactic is deception, flying a false flag, often the target nation's own colors, to close the distance without raising alarm. Only once escape is impossible does the ruse end. The false flag comes down, and up goes the Jolly Roger. This flag is arguably the pirate's most effective weapon, more so than any cannon. A plain black flag signals death and defiance, the deliberate opposite of a white flag of surrender, announcing that this ship answers to no nation's law. A red flag is far grimmer still, a promise of no mercy whatsoever. Symbols like the skull and crossbones, a skeleton with an hourglass, or a bleeding heart pierced by a blade each carried their own grim message, and famous captains built personal brands around them. Calico Jack's skull over crossed swords, Blackbeard's toasting skeleton. The purpose was to make violence unnecessary. A fight meant damaged ships, wasted powder, and fewer hands to share both labor and loot. So the ideal capture involved no fighting at all. The flag itself did the persuading. If the target chooses to resist, the captain's authority becomes total, and the crew executes practiced naval tactics, maneuvering to cross the enemy's stern, or being to fire a full broadside while receiving little return fire. Special ammunition like chain shot to balls linked by chain, shredding sails and rigging, or grape shot, a canister of small balls, turning a cannon into a giant shotgun, disables rather than sinks. When the moment is right, the captain gives the order to fire, and the deck erupts in thunder and choking smoke. Once the enemy's rigging is wrecked and confusion reigns, grappling hooks lock the ships together, sharpshooters in the rigging pick off officers, and the boarding party goes over the rail with pistol and cutlass. Outnumbered and demoralized, most merchant crews surrender within minutes. Dividing the spoils, once a prize is taken, discipline replaces chaos. All plunder belongs to the company, and any man caught skimming for himself faces severe punishment. Theft from the crew is the ultimate breach of trust, holding the whole system together. The quartermaster inventories everything, bulk cargo like sugar, tobacco, dye, or silk, the real source of wealth, naval stores like sailcloth, rope, and tools, plus the crew's and passengers' personal effects. Nothing is skipped. The ship then makes for a pirate-friendly port, a place like Nassau, where cargo is sold for hard currency. Then comes the most important ritual. The whole crew assembles, as the quartermaster pays out the compensation fund first, honoring the code's promise to the wounded, before anyone else is paid. Only then is the remainder divided by share, captain, quartermaster, specialists, and finally you, called forward by name to receive your single full share, counted out openly with no secrecy. It's more money than a decade of honest labor could have earned you, not just wealth, but independence and respect, given freely by your brothers, shore leave. Back in port, somewhere like Nassau, the unofficial capital of the pirate world, you find no cobblestones or government buildings, just a sprawl of ramshackle taverns and tents, no law, no patrols. Your share, which felt substantial at sea, starts burning a hole in your pocket almost immediately. In the tavern, you trade coin for real rum, watch shipmates gamble away a month's earnings on a single throw of the dice and laugh it off, and understand the underlying philosophy. With death an ever-present possibility, saving for tomorrow seems pointless. Better to live hard, right now. You eat well, buy fresh linen to replace your salt-stiffened shirt, invest in a new pistol, and within a week or two, the money's gone, spent on food, drink, and gear. Just as the crew runs dry, the call comes to return to sea, and you head back to the boats, nursing a sore head, but carrying fresh supplies and a new blade at your belt, the pendulum swinging once more from riot back to discipline. Passing the time, long stretches at sea with nothing to chase can be as dangerous to morale as any storm, and pirate culture developed real defenses against the boredom. Music matters enormously. A skilled fiddler might be excused from the hardest labor, yet still draw a full share. Sea shanties coordinate heavy labor, a lead singer calling out lines answered by the crew in rhythm, turning dozens of separate efforts into one coordinated pull. Folksal ballads, sung during off-watch hours, tell longer stories, battles, lost loves, tragedy, and humor, serving as the crew's shared oral history. Games of chance fill idle hours, wagering rations or possessions when coin runs short, though cheating is taken seriously enough that the quartermaster often has to intervene. And in a largely illiterate world, storytelling reigns supreme. Boasts, ghost stories of phantom ships, and practical gossip about pardons, pirate hunters, and rich cargo all circulate during the long night watches. These songs, games, and stories are what actually knit a crew of rough strangers into something like a family. And it's exactly here that the legends of the age are born and embellished. Sorting fact from legend. Living this life day to day, you start noticing that the world's stories don't match your own experience. Take buried treasure. The image of a secret chest and an X-marked map almost never reflects reality. Pirates lived by a short life and a merry one. Money was meant to be spent immediately, and any captain harding the crew's shared plunder would have been deposed or worse. The legend traces back almost entirely to Captain William Kidd, a former privateer turned outlaw who genuinely did bury some wealth before trying to negotiate a pardon, a rare, specific case later blown into a universal myth by Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. Walking the plank is likewise almost entirely fiction. There's little historical record of it happening. Pirates dealing with an enemy had faster, simpler methods. The elaborate ritual is a 19th century literary invention popularized by works like Peter Pan, and the parrot on the shoulder, while not impossible, was never standard practice. A screeching bird would be a liability during any careful approach or fight. The end of an era, word begins reaching port towns of a shift in the wind. The great powers, no longer consumed by fighting each other, are turning their navies toward piracy itself. The strategy starts with a carrot, royal pardons offered to anyone who surrenders by a set date, a genuine path back to ordinary life that many older or war-weary pirates accept, including men like Benjamin Hornigold, once a mentor to Blackbeard. The offer splits the brotherhood, since not everyone trusts the crown's word or is willing to give up their freedom. Then comes the stick, fast, well-armed naval frigates, and determined governors like Woodes Rogers, who sails into Nassau itself with pardon in one hand and warships in the other, or Alexander Spotswood, who becomes fixated on hunting down Blackbeard specifically. Cruelest of all, some pardon pirates, knowing every hideout and tactic, are hired to hunt their former brothers, turning the brotherhood against itself. The world is closing in, and the question shifts from where's the next prize to how does this end? How pirate careers ended. There was no single ending. Some died fighting. Blackbeard himself fell in close combat against naval forces, led by Lieutenant Robert Maynard, a violent end some considered preferable to the alternative. Others were captured and tried in admiralty courts with no jury, the outcome a foregone conclusion. Execution a deliberately public spectacle meant to deter others, occasionally with bodies left in iron cages at harbour entrances as a lasting warning. Punishment could also come from within, marooning, abandoned on a deserted island with minimal supplies, a fate more about isolation than instant death. Far more common, though, was simply walking away, accepting the pardon, swearing loyalty to the crown, and quietly rejoining ordinary life, a single dramatic chapter in an otherwise unremarkable story. And the dream of a quiet, wealthy retirement, like the legend of Henry Every vanishing into paradise, remained just that, a dream almost no one actually achieved, since the very culture of spend today, for tomorrow you may hang worked against ever saving a fortune. From history to legend. Once real pirates vanished from the seas, memory of the actual hardship gave way to something far more romantic. In 1724, a general history of the robberies and murders of the most notorious pirates, published under the mysterious name Captain Charles Johnson, combined genuine historical detail with dramatic storytelling, cementing figures like Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and Bonnie and Mary Read as legends. For over a century, This shaped how the world understood piracy. Then, in 1883, Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island transformed the myth entirely, inventing the buried treasure map as piracy's central goal, and creating Long John Silver, the archetype of the charming, treacherous pirate, complete with parrot. Hollywood finished the job in the 20th century. Errol Flynn's swashbuckling heroics in the 1930s and 40s turned outlaws into dashing romantic leads, a lineage that runs straight through to Captain Jack Sparrow today. So the transformation is complete. A desperate, often wretched life chosen out of necessity has become the fictional ideal of the swashbuckling free spirit. The real pirates ruled the seas for barely a generation, but the story they left behind, of freedom, rebellion, and a life without rules, has proven far more lasting than any of them. Perhaps that's because some part of us still wants a blank space on the map marked with an X. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey, from the hard truth of a sailor's life to the birth of an enduring legend. I hope you'll come back as we keep exploring history's shadows. Until then, I wish you a calm and peaceful night.